If you're watching this, it means that we just hit 10,000 subscribers here on YouTube, which is something I never thought I would be able to say. I didn't believe that I could do it, and I never thought we would get here. I've wanted to be a PokeTuber since 2012 when I uploaded my first ever Let's Play. And 11 years later, I feel like I can finally say that I've done it. But to say that it was easy would be a lie. This has been a journey that's taken me my entire life. I'm humbled by how many Poke people from around the world support me now, but how did we get here? My name is Professor Rex, and this is the story of my life through Pokemon.
This is me, back in 1997, around the time I was born. Of course, at this time, Pokemon had already taken Japan by storm, but I wouldn't discover it until years later, when I had to kiss the cheeks on a Pikachu. But that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. Especially since one of the most important parts of my Pokemon journey happened before I had ever even heard of a Pokemans. In December 1999, I met one of my best friends in the whole world. This is little baby Kyle, who many of you would know as Professor Tops. Without him, we never would have made it this far. Now, writing 15-page research papers on the inner workings of the Kanto Safari Zone isn't just something your average Joe would do. Your average Joe Merrick, sure, but not your average Joe. And I think I'd be amiss if I didn't shout out how my mum created the perfect Pokemon professor. She found ways to make learning fun. Doing flashcards was a reward for good behavior, reading time was something I had to earn, and we spent enough time at the zoo that I could give full tours if I needed to. From the first day I entered the world, my mum has supported me and encouraged me to be curious. Regardless of where everything goes from here, I know she has my back. With my mum raising me to be a mega nerd, you'd think I must be some sort of lifelong Pokemon fan, but oddly enough, Pokemon wouldn't enter my life for multiple more years. I never watched the anime because I spent all my TV time watching Arthur, Cyberchase, and Animal Planet, and my video gaming experience was all PC games like Goofy Skateboarding and the Magic School Bus games. Plus, my brain was far too full of dinosaurs to bother with anything else anyways. So, let's fast forward to 2003, the earliest memory I know of with the Pokemon franchise. I was at my friend Leslie's Pokemon-themed birthday party. And similar to Pin the Tail on the Donkey, this party had a game where we had to kiss the cheeks onto a Pikachu. Seriously, I'm not making this up. I wish I had pictures to prove this happened, but you'll just have to accept this picture of a cake and me in a sick Scooby-Doo button-up as evidence that it did happen. Also, look at this kid. I was full of Riz before it was cool. This shirt just goes so hard. Though, the thing is, for my entire life, I honestly thought this was my first interaction with Pokemon. That wasn't until I was collecting photos for this video. Looking back at this picture of me with all my flashcards shows something I found absolutely hilarious. My uncle snuck some base set Pokemon cards in with all my animal flashcards, so as far as I can tell, I was actually a Pokemon fan as early as 2000. Other than the birth of my littlest brother, things were fairly uneventful for a while. At some point, I did play a copy of Pokemon Sapphire at an end-of-season soccer barbecue where my friend Chris explained that he was trying to get a second Kyogre by breeding it in the daycare, which to me obviously made complete sense. Fast forward a few years to 2006. This is when things really picked up. My mum had succeeded. I was a smart little lad. So after finishing 4th grade, my mum took me out to try for Are You Smarter Than a Canadian 5th Grader? I didn't get on the show, but two important things happened. One, I was on TV long enough to say that I hate French.
I'm nervous about the French questions. I hate French.
And two, I got to try out an early preview of the Nintendo Wii. This was the first major step towards becoming a Nintendo fanboy. After seeing how cool Wii Play Tanks was, I knew that I wanted to buy my very first console. Tops and I saved up our paper route money and got our very own Wii. My mum thought this would be a good console to have since it required physical motion, but the game we ended up spending the most time on was Animal Crossing, which is one of my favorite games of all time, but certainly doesn't need a lot of motion. Around the same time, Kyle got a Delta Feraligatr theme deck for his birthday. And this is when Pokemon kinda took over. You see, as siblings, Kyle and I fought a lot. Though Laying Pokemon cards all over the floor and organizing them was something we were somehow able to do for hours without killing each other. With our paper route money, we bought a bunch of the Rayquaza, Kyogre, and Groudon EX tins. We had no idea how to play the game, and usually just played war with the cards. And Salamence EX was the strongest card that could possibly pop up. After getting into Pokemon card collecting, my friend Tyler offered me a trade. My Masquerain for his double rainbow energy. I can't really tell you why I remember this trade so well, but I ended up regretting the trade enough to still hold it against him 19 years later. For a while, collecting Pokemon cards was my only interaction with Pokemon, but since I also collected Webkins, Tamagotchis, Beyblades, and animal-shaped elastics, it hadn't really become anything special yet. That was until Kyle switched over to the Gifted Kid School, where he bought a Game Boy and DS along with copies of Pokemon Leaf Green and Diamond off of a kid on his bus. This is what hooked me on Pokemon. In our first playthroughs, we used Blastoise to run through Kanto and Infernape for Sinnoh. My little collector brain wanted to catch them all, a task I honestly didn't realize wouldn't be something I would complete until years afterwards, which of course was just in time for them to add more to catch. Kyle and I spent countless hours playing through these games in our rooms, and we even found our first shiny Pokemon together while making our way through Victory Road. Of course, we had no idea what it was, so we just caught it and named it Rare Color. The earliest picture I could find of either of us playing was at the airport on the way to Florida. I actually remember this flight really well because we battled a friend on the plane and his level 100 Infernape absolutely thrashed our Pokemon. Around this time, I was really struggling at school. I was bullied a lot and I struggled to fit in with my peers. I got in lots of fights trying to stand up for myself, but deep down, I really just wanted to be normal. I wasn't engaged in class because it was too easy, and I rarely actually completed homework. This led to one of the biggest changes in my life. I took the gifted test despite not really wanting to go to the weird kid school, but my mom told me that I was weird and that I was going. Once I got there, I was lucky enough to have an absolutely amazing teacher who recognized my struggles and invited me to join the D&D club. This is where I met two of my best friends to this day. Michael, Liam, and I still play Dungeons & Dragons together even 14 years later. I also met Cole, who would become a very close friend later, but honestly, I was a bit of a dick in 2009. Spending time playing D&D started to strip away my need to be cool. I realized that having fun and being yourself was so much cooler. That's not to say I suddenly became who I am overnight, though. I was still terrified of people judging me, and I would break down crying if I had to give presentations to the class because I was so afraid of being made fun of. I'm not really sure when I was able to overcome this fear, but at some point I think I realized I didn't need to pretend to be anyone else to get people to like me. Either they would like me or they wouldn't, and that was fine. One person who really liked me was a friend I made who lived down the street. Originally, he was a massive dinosaur nerd, but my questionable influence got him hooked on Pokemon and Minecraft. Luke, I don't know if you'll see this, but thank you for being so cool and getting me even deeper into Pokemon. I'll never forget how excited you were when Zoroark got leaked. It's crazy to think back at how anxious public speaking made me and compare it to now, where I'm able to easily stream to 50 plus people for hours at a time. I just don't think 12-year-old me would have believed I could do it. At this time, I had also started competitive swimming, which was getting me into better shape, and I have memories of my best friend Matt and I getting super excited about the upcoming Pokemon Black and White releases. We would rave about it on the treadmills together, and over time, I was finding that I was able to track down more and more friends that I didn't have to pretend to be anyone else around. At about the same time, I got really into Minecraft. Watching the Yogscast got me interested in making YouTube videos, and I started recording some things that never made it onto the internet.
Hi, I'm Jake, back for another documentary. Today I'm doing one on a mystery creature that has just been recently spotted in the jungle.
Kyle and I had also started buying up Nintendo consoles and Pokemon games from garage sales. We got a GameCube with a Game Boy Player for $15, and I found a Game Boy Player disc in a pile of PS2 games at a completely different garage sale for $2. So, just after starting high school, I started recording Let's Plays with the GameCube.
Hello, I'm Minosaurus Rex, and today we're going to be starting a brand new adventure in the wonderful Kanto region.
My method of doing so was kinda scuffed. I would record footage onto the DVR, then burn the footage to a DVD, then bring that to the PC for editing with Movie Maker. I wouldn't call any of these old videos good, but I was excited to make them. This only lasted a few months before I accidentally deleted a bunch of footage while trying to burn it to a disk. If you'd like to see the early videos, I'll throw them in the description. My early years of high school were pretty rough. I was certifiably cringe. I'm a flamboyant guy, and I was constantly called gay by some and then disliked by others for just being an annoying person. Though my school had something called the Leadership Camp, which was a weekend excursion to a campsite where a whole bunch of students got to bond and have fun. I'm really glad I went. It's where I ended up getting my nickname of Glowman for covering myself in glow stick goop and running around screaming.
I'm Glowman! Fear me! No! I am Glowman! Fear me! No, he's not saying that.
Was it weird? Sure. But it was me just being myself. From that point on, I think I stopped trying to be anyone but myself. I'm not normal, and that's fine. Just before the release of Pokémon X, Tops and I made our first ever solo trip to the big city. As rural townsfolk, this was a big deal. The pre-release party for Pokémon X and Y was the first in-person Pokémon events we went to, and it was so freaking cool. It became another step towards us becoming lifelong Poké-nerds. Though despite being a nerd, I still wasn't a great student. I found myself bored in most of my classes, and I really wish I had taken more drama classes, but I just slogged through all the academic classes despite hating microbiology and chemistry. Though in grade 11, I found something huge. My parents were getting divorced, and I was honestly grumpy and miserable, but then I started computer science. My teacher immediately became my favorite I'd ever come across. Coding seemed to come naturally to me, and my teacher pushed me to extend my learning, and honestly, for the first time in years, I think I was curious about learning again. Then I started getting really into Pokemon. Tops and I bought our first distribution cart, and from there, it was a slippery slope. I think I started becoming the Pokemon guy. My computer science projects were Pokemon-based. I started joining Pokemon-themed Reddit communities, though, honestly, I think a lot of it was a coping mechanism for dealing with my parents' divorce. After graduating, I took an extra year before heading to university. My grades in my final year of school were honestly horrendous, so I retook classes to actually be eligible to apply to study computer science. During this year, my life changed a whole lot. I started diving into Pokemon RNG, learning more about the games, and I set out on a quest to buy every Pokemon game and peripheral that could connect to the main series. Plus, since we had learned how to play the Pokemon trading card game, I started making bots to farm coins for us by using decks that could lose on turn 1. And then, Pokemon Go was announced. So in December of 2015, I bought myself my first smartphone. An HTC One M9. Honestly, still to this day, one of my favorite phones I've ever owned. Prior to this, I had never really felt like I needed a phone because I'd always just talked with everyone through Skype and I really only played Pokemon and League of Legends. But with Pokemon Go coming out, I needed a phone. I can't really say for sure if this was a good thing or not, though. Getting a phone lured me into Tinder, where I ended up swiping my V card for the first time, and eventually Tinder is where I would meet my first girlfriend using this awesome Pokemon Go themed pickup line. Perhaps this would seem good, but my first relationship ended up teaching me a lot of things at a time where I really should have been focused on university. I never had my heart broken, and when it came out that she was cheating on me, I just wanted to ignore it all. I tried to make it work, but she treated me horribly. When she broke up with me, I was devastated. I started harming myself, and I planned out how I would end my own life. I drove down to Lake Ontario, and I planned to swim out as far as I could and just let myself freeze. As I stood knee-high in the water, finding the will to go through with it, I found myself unable to leave my brothers alone. I'm so glad that my love for them was stronger than my self-loathing, because I would have missed out on all the amazing things to come. Luckily, all while this was happening, I had fallen in love with Pokemon Go. Even after breaking my leg, I was still on that grind. Over time, I started making friends at my university through Go. Something that made me feel a little bit less alone at a time where I felt empty. Pokemon became my escape. I became one of the highest ranked players in North America in Pokemon Duel, I played through Pokemon Moon in my dorm, and Tops got me more interested in shiny hunting, sending me off on a shiny hunt for the epic Icy Snow Vivian. Then, for the first time in years, I got to go to an in-person Pokemon event. The Pokemon Symphony Orchestra, which was a life-changing event. Sitting in a room with hundreds upon hundreds of Pokemon fans singing along to the Pokemon theme song gave me chills. I think this was the day that I fell in love with the Pokemon fanbase further than ever before. And just a little while later, Tops and I went on our first trip together. We drove out to Chicago for Pokemon Go Fest 2017. It was a disaster. The event was a mess, but being around Pokemon fans all weekend was surreal. We both agree, it was an amazing weekend despite all of the technical issues. Plus, I got one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, which you can learn about in my top 10 rarest Pokemon video, which I'll have linked at the end of this video. For Tops' birthday that year, I got him a copy of Pokemon Smeraldo, so he could shiny hunt Mew with the Palmeg glitch. It was honestly super fun working together to get this hunt set up, and it's the earliest full-on shiny we have a live recording of. Honestly, other than my love life, things were pretty cool. Until my doctor put me onto antidepressants. They helped my mood for a while, but once they were left unchecked, they sent my depersonalization derealization disorder into overdrive. I'm terrified of apathy. I had told that to my doctor long before I had started medication, but after being on a high dose of SSRIs for a while, I just wasn't the same anymore. There weren't any lows where I was idealizing self-harm, but there weren't really any highs either. I had become a shell. Computer science and philosophy had been what I had decided to study, and for the first year and a half of university, I was engaged, and my grades were some of the highest in my class. But later my grades started to slip when I would wake up and I couldn't find any more reasons to care. Luckily at this time, Pokemon still managed to slip through the cracks and give me things to be excited about, and friends to spend time with. I became the head moderator for our university's Pokemon Go Discord and eventually the co-president of the Pokemon Club. When I came home from school on the weekends, Tops and I would RNG Jirachi together and watch the WAN show, which was kind of like our weekly bonding time. 2018 Go Fest rolled around and was a highlight of my summer. I wanted to bring my youngest brother, so my mom joined us too. With just 4 of us in the car, it felt like a waste to leave an empty seat, so I made an open offer to anyone in my university's Pokemon community to join us. Something that would end up being one of the most life-changing messages I would ever send. Athi reached out saying he would be interested in joining, and the trip to Chicago in 2018 was the start to a friendship that is now going on 5 years, and would have been impossible without Pokemon Go. Sprinting around Chicago, doing raids, and catching Pokemon is an irreplaceable event in my life. If it wasn't for Pokemon, I would probably rarely travel, but Chicago was just the beginning. Tops started shiny hunting a little more seriously. In February of 2019, our friend Venti told me about Totem Rotom's Wavebird method for shiny hunting. This made Rumble Weekend insane. Though having all those TVs stacked on top of each other felt ridiculous, so I looked for a solution. What I found changed shiny hunting forever. Multiviewers let us use just one capture card to record up to 4 inputs. And so Tops' shiny hunting went from this to this. At this point, we were on our way to making Pokemon history. First though, I had to go through a terrible loss. My medication had completely ruined my ability to focus on school or remain motivated. Before exams started, I had submitted a request to have my exam deferred when I realized I just wasn't going to be in the headspace to write them, and I needed to fix things. I was told they would review my request, but if I hadn't heard back from them before my exams a couple weeks later, and I decided to write the exams, it would automatically lead to my request being denied. So I didn't write my exams, and shortly after exam season I heard back, and despite all of my doctor's documentation, my request had been denied. I got a 0 on every single exam. So after finishing my 8th semester of university, I was informed that I wouldn't be eligible to stay in either my computer science or philosophy programs. I wish I had fought more at this point, but there was nothing in the tank. I had tried to live on the straight and narrow. I had never drank or tried drugs. I had stayed in school and I had tried to be good, but I failed. I needed to cry. I needed to scream, but the emotions needed to do so evaded me. I was paralyzed by the fear of admitting defeat, so despite it being fruitless, I carried on. I took one more semester of school. I moved in with Athy for the summer so that I could attend classes, but something important happened that summer. Tops and I were playing a game of chess, and he looked at me and said, "You're really slow these days." I can't tell you why that was the wake-up call I had needed. Perhaps I had conceded that all of my failures were my fault, or that I had finally agreed that the voice in my head that had been telling me not everyone gets to be happy was right. Either way, having my brother tell me that I had slowed down snapped me to the realization that I needed to get off my medication. About a week after I had stopped taking them, I was sitting in a philosophy lecture and I was engaged, curious, and willing to participate in the discussion. For the first time in years, I was once again excited to learn. After the lecture, I stepped outside and sat on a bench where I wept. I wept for all that I had lost in the time where I could not weep. You'd think that such a moment would be dark, but it's a memory that exists within my mind in full technicolor. It was a moment of rebirth. The day I learned about wavebirding for shiny hunting was the start of the professor's lab, but this was the genesis of Professor Rex. Shortly after, I started writing a video, the top 10 rarest Pokémon in Generation 3. I had already done some shiny hunting and made videos on them, and Tops had been streaming some shiny hunting on Twitch, but this was the week that everything changed. To discover just how rare Chansey was in the Safari Zone, I had to do some research, and the bait strat was the rabbit hole I had needed to jump into content creation. The Chansey research had to be shared with the world. Before that, though, there was Pokemon Go Fest 2019, probably the most fun Go Fest to date. Athy, Tops, and I drove together and traveled far and wide across Chicago. My personal highlight was stumbling across a Pokemon Go themed guided tour of the city that a Pokemon fan was offering for free during the event. And this is also when I got into Pokemon Go's PvP. Because I had to win one of the medals, and the shiny Snorunt I had caught while in Chicago did just the trick, sneaking me 2 first place finishes in the battle tournament and winning me a whole bunch of swag. This definitely wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for the fact that Athy kept kicking my ass with Frostlass during all of our practice games, so shoutouts to homeboy Athy1. Honestly, I didn't think anything could top our trip to Chicago until we went to Montreal for the Go Safari. I'm so glad we got to go on this trip together. Athy, Ryan, Kyle, Cole, and I all stuffed ourselves into a crappy motel for one of the most perfect vacations ever. Since I just started a new job in car sales, this was a needed break, and I don't think any of us could have foreseen that it would be the last in-person Pokemon event we would get to see for years to come. When Pokemon Sword and Shield released, I properly stepped in front of the stream camera for the first time. Liam, Athy, Kyle, Ryan, and I all streamed our first playthroughs of these new games with scuffed audio, hardly any viewers, but a whole lot of laughs.
This took me a long time to figure out.
No, you didn't figure it out.
Sword and Shield was the start of something exciting. I found my first ever live shiny and I was hooked.
Oh my god!
Yes!
Yes! Oh, we finally got it!
Oh my god.
Oh, thank goodness. There it is, boys.
I streamed more of my Caesar reclaim attempts, but the biggest streams were during Rumble weekends, where we managed to find one of the rarest Pokemon of all time, Shiny Uxie.
Yo! Oh my! No! No!
No!
No!
No!
No!
Shiny
No!
Uxie! Oh my god!
Uxie!
Oh my god, dude!
Though more importantly, Rumble weekend is when we started finding friends in the shiny hunting community. Researchers like Lol Lemons and Delta Frogs stumbled in during Rumble weekend, and unforgettable nights were spent laughing with Tearful and the Underdog 2020. Despite everyone being forced to stay home with the advent of the COVID pandemic, I was making friends all over the world. Then the most important week yet rolled around. Safari Week 2020. I published my video on the bait strat, and we set out to find the shiny Chansey in the Safari Zone. At the time, we were doing something brand new. We had 16 games running at once, and we jumped to nearly 500 followers on Twitch, thanks to the support of people like AbsolVlogs Pokémon, Dallas, and a whole slew of others. Shiny Hunting and Voice Chat brought together our core moderation team. Zoe, Venti, Fire Festival, Dragon Tamer Liam, along with many more, made Safari Week 2020 an absolutely unhinged event.
Shiny Chansey! My god! Dude!
I managed to complete my Shadow Caesar hunt shortly after, and then the Twitch channel kinda stood stagnant. Until I met Jenny in a children's Roblox stream. Having a friend to stream parallel to gave me the inspiration to get back in front of the camera. After failing to catch Chansey during Safari Week, I set out to find it in February of 2021. And somehow, I managed to succeed. With all worlds conquered, I didn't really know what to hunt next, which is when I started the Professor Rex's challenge. I streamed like a madman, jumping to 1,000 followers, then 2,000, and before the end of the year, 3,000. With all this growth, I wanted to give back. Events like Safari Week and Roamer Week inspired me to create Arbor Week, an event that I'm proud of to this day. In the 3 Arbor Weeks that the lab has hosted, we've raised nearly $17,000 US. Though that first Arbor Week had my close friend Greenforce Gaming carry the streams on his back, and brought me even closer to some very special Swedish shiny hunters. Throughout 2021, I made more friends than I can even begin to count, but one that needs to be highlighted is What the Shiny. Though more importantly, I should probably call it his girlfriend, since Leah was the one that found my streams first. With what looked like the COVID pandemic slowing down, Justin and Leah invited me to come visit them in Germany. A cross-border crossover event that I had decided was worth jumping on. In December of 2021, I flew to Germany where, for the first time, I turned a random internet Pokemon person into a real-life friend. Adventuring across Germany was unforgettable. My first time in Europe, facilitated by differently colored Pokemon. And honestly, that was all I needed to catch the travel bug. Pokemon opened my eyes to wanting to see the world, something that my small town mentality had never really considered. Not only that, but content creation was feeling less and less like some crazy pipe dream. I buckled up and worked for weeks on a new video project. My investigation into the shiny rates of Unknown and Fire Red and Leaf Green bumped the YouTube channel to 1,000 subscribers, though honestly, I found myself exhausted after making it. Every big video release you see on the channel comes from days, sometimes weeks of research and countless hours of hard work. I know it might seem to some like content creation is an easy dream job, but for me, it's something that doesn't come naturally. All of my video editing is self-taught, and what pulls me through is passion. I love making videos and streams that Pokemon fans can enjoy. That being said, I'm lucky to have the support I do, because once things started opening back up, life became a bit of a whirlwind. With the Pokemon World Championships coming up, Athy, Tops, and I went on a massive TCG arc and got to re-experience the excitement of being surrounded by Pokemon fans. We flew to Seattle for Pokemon Go Fest, where we had a whole big crossover event, meeting up with Dark Amps and befriending Ali. Go Fest 2023 ended up being a crazy time, but honestly, that entire story is documented in this vlog if you want to see it. But one thing that didn't make it into the vlog was meeting and talking to Pokemon Professor Mikey, who inspired me to dive into becoming Professor Rex. Shortly after, Athy, Tops, and I flew off to London for the Pokemon World Championships. We met with Cece, Dallas, Hanger, and Mayo Chicken, befriended Tony, Craig, Cora, Bulbalite, and I got to meet my personal hero, Sajin Park. Despite the Go Last Chance qualifiers being a complete mess, our time at the World Championships was absolutely insane. The decor was out of this world, and it felt like it was the climax of my entire Pokemon journey. Honestly, I had thought that would be the end. But things went one step further when Tops and I flew to Sweden. Triggery let me stay in his house for 2 weeks, and we went on many adventures together. Journeying out into the Swedish archipelago, getting ourselves some Vilda Musen, but perhaps most importantly, the adventure of the IRL LAN. Trainer Nils, GFG, Arazagon, Joel, Tops, and I had an amazing time hanging out and playing Pokemon together. I wouldn't trade my time with them for the world. Honestly, that probably should have been enough traveling for me, but Shiny Collector had convinced me during Arbor Week to join him for TwitchCon in San Diego. I never got to be a part of a frat, so hanging out with newfound friends Uno, Sky, Dan, Brandon, Snuggy, Grim, Brittany, JP, Hector, and Chris while sipping jungle juice in the hot tub was something completely new to me. It felt like home to be surrounded by like-minded individuals all just having fun together. I'm not sure if this entire journey has made me the best version of myself, but it's helped me become a truer version of myself. I've gone from someone who struggled to make friends to someone who would definitely be classified as a social butterfly. After making all these friends, and after all these adventures, I was encouraged to make a video that I knew would be special. A video that detailed the top 10 rarest Pokémon I owned. Between Worlds, Sweden, and TwitchCon, I was pushed to make a video that I'm extremely proud of. When Scarlet and Violet rolled around, Athy, Ryan, and I had an absolute blast playing through the buggiest Pokémon game to date. And after seeing hundreds of terribly researched top 10 rare shiny videos, I set out to create the best one I could for Scarlet and Violet. I finished it just in time for the Toronto Regional Championships, where Ali came to visit us in Canada. Athy made it on the stage for the first time in Go, and I had a video skyrocket to hundreds of thousands of views for the first time since my stupid TikTok went viral in September of 2021. Honestly, the video I had made prior hadn't done anywhere as well as I had hoped, but this video was my first proof that I could do it. Something that I had honestly just been trying to convince myself of for a long time. So I got to work on the next video, one that required on-site filming with the help of Athy and my good friend Professor Polytoad. It took longer than I had anticipated, but when it was done, I felt like I had a viral hit on my hands. The thing was, I didn't. I watched the views slow to a crawl, and this was probably the biggest hit I had taken in my entire Pokemon journey to date. Over a month of work, and I didn't even break even on the costs of the sandwich ingredients. The whole time I was working on the video, I was terrified it would flop. Scared that I would manage to go from having one of the top trending Pokemon videos to nothing. And it happened. I wish I could say it didn't bother me. I wish I could say that I shook it off, but it was hard to look at something I was so proud of, something that had immensely positive responses, and still feel like I had failed. For a short time, Professor Rex was once again broken. I had to lift my chin up though. I had a trip to Orlando planned where Athy, my girlfriend, and I were going to meet up with Ali, and I was finally going to meet my friend Venti IRL, after being internet friends for years and years. Despite the trip not going exactly to plan, getting to spend time with other Pokemon fans was exactly the pick-me-up I had needed. I looked ahead to our trip to Las Vegas for the Pokemon Hoenn tour, and prepared myself once again to be the professor, not that the world deserved, but that the world needed. We climbed to the top of Red Rocks Canyon, and when I looked out across the vast expanse, I was reminded how absolutely blessed I had become. Surrounded by friends, new and old, somehow I had traveled far and wide, and not once been alone. I went to PAX, I went to Hartford and Milwaukee, each time meeting new friends and reconnecting with old ones. And now I sit here, with 10,000 subscribers closing in, and I'm honored to have been able to have all the opportunities I've been given. I honestly don't know if this is it. I don't know if this is the peak, but I'm going to Ohio for the International Championship soon, and then Tops Athy and I are doing the ultimate crossover event in Japan, literally our dream trip. And I can't let myself believe that this is anything other than the start. My life has been changed by Pokemon, sometimes for the worse, but far more often for the better. If you've been a part of this journey in any way, thank you. At the start of the video, I said, if you're watching this, it means that we've hit 10,000 subscribers. And I've been asked why I always say we when I refer to the channel, and the reason is that I couldn't have got here alone. So, what would I say about my life through Pokemon? It hasn't always been easy. There's been times where I've wanted to end it all, and at the end of the day, I'm here. It's been over 6 years since I've self-harmed. I survived heartbreak and loss, I pushed through crippling panic attacks, and I made it here. I made it to better days. Days that get to exist in color and aren't dulled by the monochromatic filter of apathy. I couldn't have done it without my brother. I couldn't have done it without my best friend, and I couldn't have done it without the Pokemon community, who've been extremely welcoming and accepting since day one. Thank you for joining me in my life through Pokemon, and letting me share just a little bit of my story. If you want to learn more about my Pokemon adventures, there's going to be links in the description to other videos, as well as to my Twitch. As I look back on it all, there's one thing that I know for certain. The rarest Pokemon always were, and always will be, the friends that we make along the way.